Hello world. We all know that Japan has fantastic public transportation. There's the Shinkansen, aka the bullet train, that moves over 1 million people a day at speeds of up to 320 kilometers or 200 miles an hour. Then there's the local trains that do the heavy lifting of transporting the nation around, carrying tens of millions of passengers daily. But there's a prefecture in Japan where standard train lines no longer exist. Of course, I'm talking about Okinawa, Japan's southernmost prefecture. Why did Okinawa get left out? Well, we can blame the US. Thanks, America. In the 1930s, there were 3 train lines in Okinawa, and car ownership wasn't big in Japan. In fact, in 1934, there were only 109,000 vehicles in the whole country versus 24 million in the United States. Then World War II started. Fuel rationing severely limited the use of private vehicles in Japan, and trains were the main people movers. And then in 1945, the US made landfall on the islands of Okinawa, the only inhabited Japanese islands that experienced a land invasion. During the assault, aerial bombardments obliterated all of Okinawa's railways. This is what Yonabaru Station, the train museum I was filming at, looked like before the war. After the battle, there wasn't much left. And as of present day, this is all that remains. What happened to Okinawa after the war is very different from the rest of Japan. The rest of Japan rebuilt and expanded the railway network, with the highlight being the Shinkansen that opened up in 1964, just in time for the Tokyo Olympics. People at the time thought the era of rail was over and that the bullet train was a big boondoggle. However, the Shinkansen has proved to be Japan's backbone of transportation and highly profitable. Most train lines were managed by the public company JNR, Japanese National Railways, which got its start in 1949. It was later split up and privatized in 1987, but during its 38-year existence, it was responsible for vastly expanding Japan's rail network. Except in Okinawa. Okinawa was occupied by the US between 1945 and 1972. During that period, the US was big on bringing freedom through highways, not only to the continental US, but to Okinawa as well.
Only half a century, the modern miracle of individual transportation has given man an entirely new concept of liberty. The freedom to go wherever he pleases, whenever he pleases.
もともとは警備員鉄道という、汽車が走ってましたけども、戦争で全部破壊されて、今はモノレールしかないけども、もう車社会にしたのはアメリカがいわゆる当時は1号線、今の国道58号線、そこをやっぱり軍港から戦車とかトラックとかを通りやすいようにして大きく道路を作って車社会にした。
So instead of rebuilding railways like the rest of Japan did after the war, the US built out an entire network of highways designed to transport their vehicles as efficiently as possible from one base to the next. Consequently, the bases were positioned in the best locations possible for the US military, with the needs of the local population an afterthought. More than that, all the land required for the bases and roads were appropriated from locals. That being said, road infrastructure was vastly improved during the occupation, even if the routes weren't ideal for locals. America's dependency on cars was successfully imported to Okinawa, and automobile usage drastically increased. The prefecture of Okinawa is a set of islands, but the main island is called Okinawa Island, which I know can be confusing. It's on Okinawa Island where the impact of US bases is felt the most. There are bases located throughout, which means that getting from point A to B often requires one to circumvent them.
あるあるある、時間帯によってはね。そんなん考えると逆にバス、モノレール、ね、の方が楽で早い。で正確。
渋滞とかってどうですか？ひどいです。もう雨降ったら本当にもう動かない。普段5分で行けるところ30分とか普通なんで。
あんまり乗らないと思います。はい。自家用車持ってる方が多いんで。
Today, Naha City on Okinawa Island has the worst traffic congestion in Japan, outdoing much larger cities like Tokyo and Osaka. Yes, you heard that correctly. Naha, with a population of 300,000, has worse traffic than the 23 wards of Tokyo, population 9 million, and Osaka, population 2.7 million. The average travel speed in Naha during the morning and evening peak hours is only 13.3 kilometers an hour, versus 16.8 in the 23 wards of Tokyo and 17.7 in Osaka. New York traffic is faster. You can easily bike faster than that, and on many portions, walking is faster. For example, this is a 2-lane road that feeds into a bigger one, and I think we spent about 10 minutes waiting our turn to, well, turn. The traffic was so slow that I was able to hop out of the car, film as much as I wanted, and get back in without an issue. An official of Okinawa Prefecture said that people in Okinawa are so accustomed to traffic congestion, they don't recognize it as abnormal. In 2003, Okinawa got rail transportation back in the form of a monorail called Yui Rail. When it opened, there were only 32,000 daily riders, but in 17 years, that number nearly doubled, hitting 56,000 in 2019. Ridership drastically dropped during the pandemic, but as of this video in 2023, it appears that ridership numbers have recovered. Ridership is so strong that they expanded the line in 2019. Additionally, they will be increasing capacity by running 3-car trains instead of 2 in 2023. This will allow the monorail to carry 256 passengers at a time instead of 165.
モノレールもだって空港から首里城の、今浦添まで伸びたけど、そこの人たちは使えるけどさ、ここに住んでる人たちは使いようがないよね。
仕事行く時なんかはバスとかモノレールはよく乗りますよ。車もあるんですけど、モノレールとかの方がずっと安いから、もっと言えばバスの方が安いから、そしたらコンビニとかでも車使ったりとか歩いて行けるのに。
歩かないです。近くのコンビニもさっと車に乗って行きますね。
歩かないですね。そうですね。あんまり歩かないです。車ないと生活できないので、車があるのでついつい歩かないですね。
一家に1台じゃなくて、1人1台なんですよ、車って。家族5人いて成人してたら5台ありますよ、車が。車がないと仕事もできない。車がないとどこへも行けないっていう感覚。
The elevated monorail connects Naha Airport to Urasoa City and is a great ride, as long as it goes where you want to. The issue is that it's the only rapid transit system available and it doesn't serve nearly enough locations. With the way roads are set up and with the amount of vehicle traffic, buses can only travel so fast. Even if you had non-stop buses one after another, there's a carrying capacity that you hit that a dedicated rail line will outperform. With the monorail, the average travel speed is 28 kilometers an hour, double the average speeds of vehicles down below. Because riding the bus is generally no faster than taking a private vehicle, and sometimes slower with its frequent stops, even a bus that has stops right where you want to get on and off isn't very appealing. And because there are so many 2-lane roads, buses aren't going to work well in most places, doomed to get stuck in traffic. It's almost always more convenient and quick to take a personal car, and that's exactly what happens. Approximately 90% of travel in Okinawa is by private vehicle, while only 3% is public transportation. Nationwide, about 66% of travel is by private vehicle, whereas it's 30% by public transportation. And in Tokyo, it's 17% by private vehicle and a whopping 77% by public transportation. The one thing that I noticed that seems like a kind of saving grace is the number of K-cars on the road. K stands for karui, which means light, so you can think of K-cars as lightweight cars. They can be no longer than 3.4 meters and no wider than 1.48 meters. They're small, and this means that you can fit more cars on the same amount of road, and that when situations get tight, there's more flexibility. If the residents of Okinawa had also adopted the American love of trucks and SUVs, I could only imagine how much worse traffic would be. For example, the most popular selling vehicle in the US is the Ford F-150, and its smallest variation is 17.4 by 6.7 feet. If I'm doing the math correctly, they take up twice the amount of road as K-cars do. And it's a good thing that the cars are small, because I've seen them parked in all sorts of weird ways. Is there space on the sidewalk? Well, pull on up. Facing against traffic? No problem. Is that a play structure for kids? Let's park right inside. So far I've talked about how traffic congestion is a mess in Okinawa, but are there any fixes on the horizon? What has Japan done since it got Okinawa back 5 decades ago? Okinawa is one of the few prefectures in Japan that is still growing, and car ownership continues to increase. In fact, since the prefecture was restored to Japan in 1972, the number of cars owned in Okinawa has grown over 5-fold. As of 2020, there are 0.8 vehicles per capita. This is in comparison to 0.65 vehicles per capita in the whole of Japan and 0.33 vehicles per capita in the prefecture of Tokyo. And fun fact, in the US, there is 0.83 vehicles per capita, so Okinawa is a lot more like the US than it is the rest of Japan. When Okinawa was reverted from the US to Japan in 1972, the Japanese government did look into building railroads like they had across the rest of the country. But that got derailed. I apologize, it was sitting right there and I couldn't help myself. At that time, private vehicle ownership in Japan was increasing dramatically, and the passenger market for trains was losing share to those vehicles. The public railway company, JNR, was in massive debt, having built railways all over Japan in the 50s and 60s. And due to the two world oil crises in the 70s, the government's tax revenues fell and it couldn't continue to support the railways like it had. So while there were calls to build commuter railways and monorails, many believed the era of railways was over. Building out the road systems and expressways seemed like the best choice, and that's what happened. And for 3 decades more, there were no railways. Interestingly, the central government did provide Okinawans with a gas tax break of 7 yen per liter to alleviate transportation cost burdens. It's the only prefecture to receive this special treatment, and the 50-year-old program continues on to this day. After the monorail system was built in 2003, an even more ambitious plan started to form in 2012. There was to be a 69-kilometer railway that would connect Naha to Nago in 1 hour. The U.S. Marine Corps Air Station Futenma would be relocated and a station built on its land. And by 2029, Okinawa would finally get its first standard train line in almost 100 years. Sadly, absolutely nothing has happened since that 2012 study commissioned by the Cabinet Office. Futenma Base still exists, and ongoing controversy over its relocation guarantees that it's not moving anytime in the next few years. Well, I said absolutely nothing has happened since 2012, however, I do have to admit I was exaggerating a bit. The Cabinet Office has created a new report each and every year, recently coming out with its 10th anniversary edition in 2022. And the conclusion, yet again, is that they'll keep on researching. For all you American urbanists that complain about your car-centric country, even Japan hasn't been able to un-America itself for half a century. Don't be too hard on yourselves. And for all of you who think I'm trying to blame America for Okinawa's traffic problems today, I don't think that's fair. I think the Japanese government can take a whole lot of credit as well. And while public transportation is lacking in Okinawa, it's quite good across the rest of Japan, as you may have seen on Jetlag the Game, which recently played a season here. Coincidentally, I happened to make a one-day video challenge riding all the different forms of transportation in Tokyo a few months ago. So watching the Jetlag crew go through something similar was really entertaining. What you might not know is that Jetlag is one of the many shows that always have videos one cycle ahead on the streaming service Nebula. Now here's another thing you might not know. On this project, I used a lot of archive footage. Part of this was from the Okinawa Prefectural Archives, but a lot was also from media partners, whose video and images I could gain access to now that I'm a Nebula creator. Nebula is a streaming service built by and owned by creators like me. And generally, when you hear other creators talk about Nebula, I think they really try to emphasize what's in it for you, the viewer, like access to exclusive content, such as Nebula Originals or classes. But I also wanted to let you know what it's meant to me as a creator, and why you might consider supporting me there. As mentioned, I can now get access to previously cost-prohibitive archive materials. I can also make use of Nebula Studios, whose fantastic map work was featured in several spots throughout this video. It's enabling me to tell stories that I previously hesitated to or would shorten down, as I didn't have the visuals to show what I was talking about. It's also given me a group of other like-minded creators to talk with, because while there are a lot of YouTubers nowadays, it's still a new kind of job, and things are changing every day. In fact, the CEO of Nebula has a podcast where he talks to other creators about the creator economy, and it's the closest to getting a peek behind closed doors with other YouTubers that I've ever seen on the internet. So if you're interested in the nitty-gritty of how it all works, I'd recommend checking it out. Anyways, if you like what I do and want to support, joining the Nebula streaming service is one of the best ways to do so, if only because it gives me the resources to make better videos that you can then watch. And on Nebula, you can watch all my videos, and those of other creators, ad and sponsor free. Joining the annual plan is generally the best bet, as you'll get 40% off the price, which works out to only $250 a month. Okay, that's the pitch. A special thanks to Professor Viba, I hope that's close to how you pronounce it, who drove us through Okinawa traffic and had us as guests at the University of the Ryukyus. Much appreciated. for watching. See you next time. Peace. What's traffic like where you're from?